All right, it is Tuesday, August 9th, a little early in the week for a Tjrs, but the man's feeling good after his 73rd birthday. Hall of Fame celebration. He's back. He's not bored, I don't think, but here's Riggo.
All right, yeah, you're right, Todd. I'm feeling pretty good, considering I did turn 73, last Thursday, I guess it was. Some of us are a little bit worse for the wear for the big celebration over there.
I heard it was good. I heard it was good.
Oh, good, yeah. I figured that's the way you would find out what the party was all about, that you would have to hit it secondhand. Listen, last week we did the show, right, when I got back from Mexico.
Uh-huh.
And I didn't go out and inspect my tomatoes. So I went out and looked at my tomatoes last week. And I go out there, Todd, and I'm looking at them, and I'm going, now they'd struggled when I got the big heavy-duty grow lamp and all this bullshit. And they as plants, as seedlings, when I planted them, it just wasn't right. Now, I don't know whether, it was a new toy for me getting this grow lamp, and it was definitely a JP5 grow lamp. I mean, it was.
He went big time. Big time.
Yeah, we had plenty of horsepower.
Did you even have to read the instructions?
Exactly. Well, I know when I had to go in, I had to get one of those asbestos suits the firemen wear. That's all silver on the outside, just to go in there. Special sunglasses. So anyway, they were a little bit rough, but they seemed fine. Once I got them outside, the natural sun, they came around, so I put them out there. Now these plants are, I don't know, they're probably 4 or 5 feet tall now, right? And they're big tomatoes. But when I got back from Mexico, I went out there and I looked at them, and I noticed that all of them had got leaves that were all withered and almost turning white. Well, right before I left to go to Mexico, I had applied some stuff from Energy Curve Technologies to my plants.
Our friends at ECT.
A little bit of stuff for hydro, which it kind of conserves water once it gets in the grass. And then I put on a form of a benefit. What was it called? I can't think of the exact benefit hay, but it's like a fertilizer, basically, 12-12-12. Uh-huh. But I also mixed in a little tenacity, which is mesotrione.
So wait a sec. Is that outside the ECT family?
Yeah, that's a pesticide.
So Riggo went chemist, and you mixed your own
concoction. Somebody else went chemist. I just bought their product. I just bought the product. I've used it before. It's really what it really is. Nimblewill is one of the things I get over there, and there's another plant that is just so invasive. Well, there's several of them, actually. I can be here all day when talking about weeds that get into your yard. But this stuff turns, when it gets into the plants that it affects, grass it doesn't bother, it turns them literally as white as this piece of paper. Damnedest thing you ever saw.
So it's doing good by making them turn white.
Yeah, well, guess what else it turns white?
Your tomatoes?
I think so. And I thought I was so careful. I guess the reason I'm telling everybody this, if you do, and I'm to the point now where I'm actually, and I've always been on that line, how can you actually, do your lawn, garden, whatever, and do it organically, as opposed to using all the the latest chemicals out there. I've tried to get away from it, so much so this past week, or the last couple of days, I started looking up worms. Like, I'm going to turn loose about 10,000 red wigglers out there in my lawn.
Say what?
What's that?
Worms
will do a lot of things. They'll help fertilize. They break down all the organic matter that's in the lawn that turns into thatch and all that stuff. And maybe most important of all, they aerate the soil. So that gets oxygen down in, and water's able to get to the roots.
You said 10,000.
At least.
Where is one going to purchase 10,000 of these
it's like
super seal worms?
All you got to do is go look up worms, and you'll find there's all kinds of places you can buy them. There's one place up here in Pennsylvania where I think I've already bought some.
Well, of course, you're not going to get local worms. I'm not
going to down by the river and dig them, that's for sure. Like I used to when I used to go fishing. You're going to get
like the SEAL Team 6 of worms.
Well,
probably from
well, if you want to get SEAL Team 6, that would be the European night crawlers. No, that's SEAL Team 6. I think they get up to about 5-6 inches long. I remember years ago when now you got me talking about worms. I'll get back to what I was talking about earlier. I remember when my brother went to Boy Scout camp, and I went down there the first time, and I was running along because they had a family evening for all the scouts, because you're down there a week camping out in old army tents and all this stuff, and in a little timbered area with a lake and all that. And I remember running over to, I don't know where I was running, and I run by this, and there was a coffee can. That used to be the preferred method of transportation for earthworms back in those days. And somebody had brought night crawlers, Todd, I swear to God, those night crawlers were as big around as my little finger. I mean, I was like running, and I happened to look down, and I stopped. And I had to go back and go, oh, shit, where did you get those night crawlers? But anyway, getting back to, because the earthworms are good for the soil. And so I think inadvertently, and this is something that I would have swore that I was more careful than that, but you just don't know, that obviously there's a little bit of drift. Whenever you spray, there's parts of it that are so minuscule and fine that if there's any breeze at all, and I didn't really think there was, but that's where pilot air, some of that stuff drifted onto the plant, so a little bit of them are a little bit withered, not looking real good.
So we think that.
But the tomatoes look okay.
Okay.
The tomatoes, but it has withered something. Where the blossoms are, that's where a tomato plant grows, or tomato actually grows. Some of those blossoms didn't look so good, but I still got a few tomatoes, so I was going to have more.
I got to go back to the worms, John. I got to go back. I'm fascinated by this. So believe it or not, back in Manassas in the day, me and my younger brothers, we'd camp out at night, and we'd catch worms at night with flashlights, go and get them for fishing and all that.
This is now, let me stop you for a second. Is this after a rain? Because worms usually at night, particularly night crawlers, you'll see them up on top of the grass moving around after a rain.
Yeah, we'd catch them up for our own bait.
I'm very impressed.
Fishing in the Bull Run Creek.
Country boy can't survive.
Yeah. So, but I've never heard anybody in my years of existence on this planet say, I'm going to bring about 10 to 20,000 worms on my property. Is there a downside to this? Is there a possibility like they take over the house or the lower levels?
No, I don't think so. I don't know that for a fact, but there's worms. Hopefully there's worms out there, but there's not near enough. That's the other thing pesticides do. If you're spraying for weeds and all that stuff, they kill your earthworms. I'm thinking some of it will. So kind of a, rob Peter, pay Paul type of situation there. Now, I'm just, like I said, I'm thinking about it. It's not that ridiculous, although I believe I looked, and you wouldn't believe about, for like a square yard of yard for a square yard, how many worms that it takes, a couple hundred or whatever. I mean, it's like, 10,000 might not be enough for my yard. But I'm figuring I'll start and see what happens. What I'm afraid of, though, is then, the following morning after the worms are dispersed, I wake up and I go out and there's like flocks of robins out in my yard.
I was going to say, you're going to have flocks of birds coming down and saying, hey, we've got an all-you-can-eat buffet over at the Riggins.
That's right. But then again, that's when I go back up into raccoon mode and I lie in wait. That reminds me of another story years ago that I couldn't figure out what it was. I had a garden. I was living over in Virginia at the time, and I'd built a tree house. And so the garden was right, the tree house overlooked the garden. It's kind of inconsequential, but it turned out to be in my advantage, my favor. And I was living over there in Fairfax County, Vienna actually, and I'd planted corn, right? And I had my little garden and everything was all nice. And I went out there and I was waiting for my corn plants, and the corn plants had come up. They just started to sprout. And I went there the next, one day and I looked at them, and I noticed they weren't there. They'd been extirpated, something had pulled them out, and just boom, 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 right down the row. And so I went out there the next morning, and it was, it was crows.
Oh.
Crows had done me in.
Those bastards.
So I went back out the next morning with the Auto 5. And sure enough.
Say hello to my little friends.
That's exactly what it was. There was a crow that came, and he was roast toasty. He was DOA. Well, no, he was DOS, dead on the spot. So this is what I did, and I got to tell you, I got it from the natives up in Kotzebue, where they go out and they dry fish. They catch their fish, and they'll put it out to dry. I was up there bear hunting years ago. And what they do is, because they got
this is the natives in Alaska.
Mm-hmm, yeah, up around Kotzebue, Alaska. It seemed to work for them, but they take and they'll kill a magpie, because they're like giant crows. I mean, they're big. And then they take and they'll hang it, and they'll let it, they just hang it there like it was an effigy, and so
it's kind of what you do with third world dictators or Mussolini.
Yeah, exactly. Mussolini comes to mind. Don't do this. Don't act like him. Don't act like him. And so I did it, and guess what? My crows went away. I skinned the crow out, and I salted him all down a little bit so he wouldn't all rot on me and stuff. Dried him out.
Let this be a lesson, Heckle and Jekyll and any of you other...
Heckle and Jekyll, two of the most famous magpies in existence, for sure. Now, let me get on to something that really touched me here the other day that I had. I was reading some of the story, and then I came across this. In early July out in Colorado Springs, there was a young boy who was, I think he was 6 years old, and he was bitten by a rattlesnake. Him and his dad was out riding their bikes. He stopped to go look at a mile marker sign to get over there, and he yells, "Rattlesnake." And within seconds, he collapses. So his dad didn't have his cell phone with him. He grabs him, he runs him to an intersection, they get him to the hospital. He passed away 4 days later. He went into cardiac arrest.
Gosh.
He was, after so many hours, I suppose 24, 48 hours, the doctor said he's brain dead. There's no life, there's no brain life that we can detect. They had to take him off life support, and of course he died. But it fascinated me in the way that I've always been snakes. To say they give me the willies isn't quite right, but they do when it's unexpected. There's something about a snake. A mouse, maybe gives you a little, oh, you know what I'm saying? Or a rat. We all have different
like seeing them on the inside of your house or something if you saw it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even I saw a black snake the other day, and it just, which I think is a great snake. And I don't like killing snakes, and I don't recommend anybody kill snakes. Some people will just because it's a snake, it's evil. You know what I mean? It's just like the way we think, and the way we're brought up, and all this stuff. I suppose. Would the church have anything to do with that? I don't know. Well, let's get.
I don't want to get old time religion. We go down and with the rattles.
I was thinking in what do you call it, in the New Testament, isn't it, where you got the Adam and Eve and the guy that's hanging out in there saying, "Eat that apple, eat it. It's good for you."
Well,
very healthy.
That's bad branding from an early.
But anyway, so as I said, I don't have a fear of snakes. I'm fascinated by them, actually. I really am. There's just something about a snake, and the way it traverses, the way it can move. There's just something that is fascinating. Doesn't have legs. Doesn't have any legs. So, anyway, and when I see one and I didn't know it was there, it scares the hell out of me. I'll be honest with you. But once I see it and I know where it is, I'm fascinated. I got to watch it and all this stuff. But then I got to thinking, do you realize that there are over 5 million people every year bitten by snakes in the world? 5 million?
No.
Yeah, there's that many snake bites that go on. And of all these snake bites, relatively few, I think it's like 8,000 happen here in the U.S., and I don't know the exact numbers. I can't remember off the top of my head, the deaths that occur. But like this young child that was bitten, you never know. And I've got copperheads around my place, right?
Yeah.
I've killed a couple of them just because, look, I don't really want to do it, but you're on my turf, and you got a little problem there. You got a little poison problem, my friend.
Get your kitty or a kid or you or anybody else.
And that's the thing you don't know about these things. Is you may be somebody who, take a copperhead, not a particularly poisonous snake, but it is poisonous. It's a viper. And its bite, if nothing else, it can cause a lot of degeneration of tissue and all that stuff. So it's like you'll survive it more than likely, but you could have an actual, reaction to the actual venom, as opposed to the average person wouldn't. Almost like the virus that killed so many people. Some people had a much worse reaction to it than other people, and that's the same way with a snake bite. But the fact that there's that many, there's that many snake bites in the world on any given basis, and there's in India alone, and that would be the place where most of this, the deaths occur actually, because I was just trying to say here that out of the about 5.5 million snake bites, 2.5 million are envenomed, meaning that they're either poisonous snakes they would be poisonous snakes if they're envenomed. Sometimes a snake bite could be a poisonous snake, but it doesn't deliver any venom. It's it's called a dry bite. But out of that, about 80 to 138,000 people die every year from snake bites. And the weirdest part about that is 60,000 of those are in India, over half.
Yeah.
Or right at half the snake bites in India. They've got a cobra over there, and they've got a crate, a banded crate, I believe it is. And I think what it is because India is so populated.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of agriculture, I guess I've never been, but I would take it that there's a lot of subsistence living over there. People that have to get out into the fields and work the land and all that
the abject
stuff.
poverty is sadly off the charts over there in the volume of people, as you said.
And so you have interaction. Give an example. There's a snake in Australia when it comes down to it. I mean, I always thought Africa, but it's Africa, Asia, and Latin America is where most of the snake bites occur. And there's a snake in Latin America called a fer-de-lance, or a lance head. It's also bothrops is what I call it. But it's a big viper too, and its venom is almost like getting injected with hydrochloric acid. It just like almost melts the flesh.
Woo.
It's bad. It's a bad snake too. But of all these snakes, there's one from Australia, and Australia has got. They were never mentioned like the U.S. And the U.S. were very fortunate. You got rattlesnakes, water moccasins, copperheads, and a coral snake. The three are vipers. A coral snake is not a viper, and its venom is a little bit different. It's neurotoxic versus hemotoxic. The other two, which hemotoxic destroys flesh, neurotoxins work on the nervous system, causes paralysis, and perhaps even you can't breathe anymore. You die of suffocation, basically. But
Are you a herpetologist?
No, but I've over the years.
I think you're a frustrated herpetologist, Riggo.
Yeah, I don't think so. Only because you'd have to handle the snakes, and I don't go that far. That's where I draw the line. I'm not that fascinated with snakes.
You'd handle them, but they must be dead.
Yeah.
You're
That's another thing. Don't even handle a dead snake.
Post-mortem.
Or the snake's head that's got cut off. Because you can accidentally inject yourself. The snake's dead, but it still happens.
Well, then you're a rookie.
But I did a little research for today. But there's also, over the years, I've accumulated a little bit of knowledge about this. And there's so many, and a lot of herpetologists end up being bitten by snakes and dying. I know one from the University of Kansas that's happened to in Southeast Asia probably 20 years ago. I didn't know who it was, but I just know that that's where they were from. But anyway, I don't know what the long and short of what I'm trying to say is, but that, excuse me for a second, is that don't take them, like I was starting to get kind of nonchalant about the whole deal. And I don't think that's good, only because you don't exactly know what kind of reaction you're going to have. The one thing, though, is there's several things you don't want to do if you would happen to be bitten by a snake. One is do the old, and they used to have these snake bite kits you used to buy when you could take out with you, and it was basically like this thing you put an X on both fang marks and put this little tube over it and pinch it, and it would suck the poison out.
Huh.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what the reaction should have been. Huh. Because
I'm in deep trouble.
Yeah, well, it's not the way to go. You're just get help as quickly as you can. Take off jewelry and all this stuff. Cleanse the wound if you have a chance to. Draw a circle around it, write the time that it happened, and then after so much time, you keep doing that so that the doctors can get an eye. But the whole idea is to get yourself to a medical place.
Well, let me give you a situation. You're hiking in Shenandoah, right? You're out in Front Royal in the Shenandoah, and you're hiking, and boom, you get bit on the leg, and you don't have cell coverage.
Right.
And let's say you got a couple of miles away from an automobile, or any idea what to do?
I'd say you'd have to hike out of there. Or somebody depending on the severity of the bite. Shenandoah is a little bit different because more likely to be a rattlesnake. It almost have to be a rattlesnake or a copperhead that you were bitten by. But you don't want to panic. In other words, you want to try to keep as calm as you can. But particularly if you're by yourself, you don't have any choice but to get your butt out of there and get to a hospital, and give them as much information about the snake that bit you if you saw it, how big it was, and if you can identify it. That type of information, as far as I'm aware. But you bring up a great point, because years ago I was going to do a little hiking up in Garrett County, Maryland, and basically just kind of bushwhack about a 10 or 12 mile hike, right?
Right.
So if you get in there and you're 6 miles in, and like you said, you wouldn't have any cell coverage. More than likely. You would have to try to ease it on out of there the best you could, I suppose. There isn't a whole lot more you could do. What really is a problem. So sucking the poison out in the old school movies. No tourniquets, no ice. Really? Yeah, that's bad. Yeah, that's bad. Just leave it alone. It's going to run its course. The bottom line is the quicker you can get to a hospital where they have anti-venom, and that's why it's important to recognize the type of snake that bit you if you can, that they can actually reverse the process. It's almost like, what is it, Narcan or whatever that is? Narcan? Narcan for heroin for opiate overdoses. That they can actually, because what happens in a lot of these instances that, the 3 times, like probably 300,000 or 400,000 people actually suffer debilitating injuries. They survive, but they very well could get an amputation.
Yeah.
They take the leg off, or you get some other disability. So, like I said, it's just one of those deals you don't want to.
Well, it's that time of year when people out and about and doing the hiking and enjoying it. Did you ever, when you had your outdoor show, give us a background on that. How many episodes did you do, or is that a one-time thing?
What did we do, about 12, 14?
Was that
we did about 30, I guess, close to 30, 25.
Well, I'm not talking about Riggo on the range. I'm talking about, didn't you do the American Sportsman? Or
no,
what were the hunts that you did in Africa?
Oh, okay. I went on and that's a good point, because over there, like I said, Asia, Africa, and Australia have a lot of poisonous snakes. I mean, I always think.
That's what I'm saying. Did you ever encounter any in any of your hunts?
Never did come across anything. I did see the tail end of a black mamba as it slid it off the road.
And where were you in Africa?
I was in Zimbabwe.
Okay.
Yeah, there's another snake called a boomslang, which is native to Africa. It's a real pretty green snake.
A boomslang?
Boomslang. Go figure. I didn't make that.
That'd be a cool name for a rock band.
We're
boomslang.
And actually, it's a cool-looking snake, but its poison it's got something additive in its poison, makes it different than a lot of other snakes. That when it bites you, you actually start to hemorrhage internally. They talked about this one herpetologist who got bit years ago at the University of Chicago, because he didn't think that the boomslang, a juvenile, had enough venom to really be lethal to a human being. Well, he didn't live to tell the tale. That he started bleeding internally from like his eyes and his brain.
Oh, boomslang, you are a nasty SOB. Come on,
and it's
man.
got fangs at the back of its mouth.
Oh, now you're just showing off.
No, they're like, hey, I'm harmless. I ain't got no fangs. Look. I lied. I'm a snake.
Hey,
remember the song? The song? It's like, what'd you expect? I'm a snake. You took me in, you warmed me up, gave me some food, and I bit you. Well, God damn it, ain't my fault.
Well, this is something in this time of year, and we were reminded sadly again last week on just how powerful lightning is, and is not to be trifled with.
Oh, yeah.
With the 4 people that got hit in Lafayette Park right behind the White House.
And 2 of them died, right?
3 of them have died.
Oh, the third one died.
The third one died. It was in critical condition,
Wow.
and I think that gentleman was 26 or 28 years old, visiting, and the elderly couple that was on celebrating their wedding anniversary from Wisconsin touring, they all went under a tree. And that tree acts as a conductor,
Yep.
and there's still one in critical condition. So everybody's back out with the safety warnings, and if you hear thunder,
You know what you're supposed to do is get to any kind of depression you can find. You want to go low. You don't want to stay up above in a tree. That's why in years ago, that's what would happen to cattle herds. They'd get wiped out because
Right.
they would all congregate under a tree with hail and all this stuff. Lightning hits that tree. I don't know. That's what they used to tell us out there. I never ever saw it, but I don't have any reason to doubt it. I mean, that's a lot of current coming down there.
Yeah, it's nothing to be.
I mean, it's instant heat. Poof, you're gone.
Yeah, not good. So do not try, because right here, I mean, we know we're going to get that chance every afternoon here.
Yeah.
In the dog days of July and August.
I thought yesterday.
Every single, and you get some vicious ones coming up the Potomac there that flow through from the west here, that once they get to here, if they don't do anything, usually you're getting across the river there.
Yeah, you bring a great point about that. I never even thought of that, about, lightning. And I think a lot of us have a tendency to ignore it and don't, it's one of those things that always happens to the other guy, right?
Right.
You never know when it's your turn.
If you did your lightning research as to snake bites and how prevalent it is here in the U.S. in particular, for whatever reasons, we have a tremendous amount of lightning here in the U.S. because playing as much golf as they do, and most golfers, they want to tend to ignore it, and that's also a really bad.
Right.
You're out there either holding a club, or the first thing we all do is go get in a tree, versus you should just lay down on the fairway
and take it like a man.
If you're stuck there, versus if you can't find your way back to the clubhouse or any shelter they may have at a halfway house or whatever. But
I think that I'll never forget when we were in Carlisle that I believe it had to have, because practice was over with, and the thunderstorm, and I think we might have got out of practice a little bit early because it was it was a thunderstorm and it was getting ready to develop, and you could see it was coming. So as a rule, and I think a lot of people know this, they hear me talk about it, I was always notoriously the last one out of the locker room, and for whatever reason. So I was one of the few people left over there at the Dickinson College there where their athletic facility was. And Todd, there was an explosion. It felt like it came just on the other side of the wall from where I was. And I think lightning had hit one of the transformers there.
Oh, wow.
Literally across the street. But you talk about, opening your eyes up. It's like fireworks you've never heard before.
It was almost like you think
it almost like blew me out of
a bomb or a military.
Yeah, exactly what it sounded like was a bomb, like somebody dropped a bomb. And I never thought much about it. I was in the building, but yeah, I'm one of those people sometimes. Particularly, and people, boaters, fishermen are out on open water, and what do? They head over to the bank, get under a tree. It's like, what are you going to do?
Like you say, everybody's playing, the roulette.
Stay away from anything that will conduct electricity, basically.
Well, speaking of Carlisle, and a great segue there, because all training camps underway for NFL ball players here.
First games take place this week, don't they?
Yeah, well, the first one was last Thursday.
Right, but I guess
now everybody gets going. There's so basically games are Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and probably some Sunday games too, that go on for the 4 preseason games, or exhibitions, as we like to call them.
As the NFL likes us to call them.
Because, it's going to be interesting to see how much of the first teamers get to play. But again, as it impacts Washington, there's so many unknowns, and with Carson Wentz and rookies and this and that. And so,
who's Wentz's backup at this point? Do we know?
It is Mr. Heineke.
It is Heineke.
Yeah, pretty sure he is number 2. Haven't been paying a ton of attention out there because this is just a joke. You got guys tweeting out the news and evaluating Carson Wentz with nobody in front of him, literally doing pitch and catch. Like, hey, John, go out 10 and out. And no, not even 7. Oh, no. Wait till you see what I have on the collective bargaining agreement.
What they can do.
And what practice. We talking practice? Allen Iverson he could have written this collective bargaining agreement.
They probably consulted him.
We talking about practice.
He said, well, no.
Fans, listen, whatever your notion of they're out there in the heat and it's, 2 days and a day, so what? Do you remember how often you had 2 a day? So do you remember, just give me maybe a typical, can you remember a typical week of practice leading up to a preseason exhibition game in which you guys played 6 exhibition games?
Way back when. Then eventually it was cut to 4 when they went to a 16-game season. Mm-hmm. That was probably in the late 80s. What did I say, late 80s? 76, 77. Because they added 2 teams in 76, didn't they? They added Seattle and I can't think of the other team. Oh, Tampa. I believe it was Seattle and Tampa. So they went to a 16-game season. Yeah, usually what I recall, it was at least 2 weeks of 2-a-days. And as I said, we talked about this last week, I think, that, at least I did, and I'm sure there was a lot of players like me, that, you went to camp to get into shape. You weren't working out, a month after the season was over. You didn't start lifting weights and running and doing all this stuff. And so we had at least a week or 2. And depending on what the team looked like, it was all decided by the coach. And that was back in the days when, you would do your calisthenics and warm up, and I never got in on that, though. I do not recall doing grass drills. You've heard of them, right?
Right.
Or up downs and all that stuff, where you run in place and then the coach blows a whistle and you drop to the ground and then you jump back up and you come back up and run in place until he blows the whistle again.
Up downs.
And literally, it's an exercise that, depending on your body, what do you call it, body mass index or whatever it is.
Your BMI.
Yeah, your BMI. And usually the linemen were the first ones to drop and flop. There was that's a lot of extra muscle. You're using a lot of muscle to pull the blubber around with you. But you go all the way down to, I think the DBs were the last ones. They were still running and dropping. But I would say 2 weeks of 2-a-days, and then the practices were always 2 hours long. It could have been 2.5 weeks. I don't really recall, because it was always one of those signs. And actually, sometimes I'm wondering, and then the practice would taper off as everybody started to get in shape and all that. But it was not a lot of fun. You was out there for at least 2 hours. And the thing I remember the most about it was the soreness that you have for the first couple of days. And that's the thing that's why I always figure, well, what the hell do I need to run for before this all starts? Because unless you were going to do stuff like running, like at full speed and then stopping and planning and doing all that, that's the stuff that actually, because you're not used to that. You can run all day long around a track, run miles and all this. You can run wind sprints. But until you start stopping and planning and doing all that, that's what you're actually getting in shape for.
That's amazing you said that, John, because already in the first week, there is a huge rash of ACL tears already. I think it's close to 10 of some significant players have already had.
And there's been no contact for the most part.
No, you can't. I'm about to read you what you can and cannot do. This is from the Collective Bargaining Agreement, Article 23, preseason training camps. I'll get into the per diem in a second. The first 5 days is a 5-day on-field acclimation period. 5 days. Now here
sounds very corporate, doesn't it?
Yes. And first day of a club's preseason training camp shall be limited to physical examinations, meetings, and classroom instruction. No on-field activities shall be permitted other than running and conditioning. No footballs may be used.
For the first 5 days at camp.
No plays or
footballs.
No plays or walkthroughs are permitted. No individual players. This is a 5-day field acclimation.
So when they first got there, all these teams, when all these players first arrived, with here in the last week or so, the first 5 days, this is what they did?
Well, this is the first. So you got the first day is limited to physicals and that. Days 2 through 5 of preseason training camp, no live contact. Players may be on the field no more than 3.5 hours. You can break that down into 2 sessions, but the combined can't equal more than that. Now, so they call it. This is fascinating, and this is throughout. All of these sessions, every practice has to be filmed and recorded and preserved. So everybody's under watch by the Players Association and by the league. And you have to preserve the evidence for at least 30 days until past the start of the regular season in case anybody complains, somebody drops a dime and says they're doing, which I believe the Commanders got fined recently for that. As
for going over the line.
Violating some OTA stuff. So they call it, and this is on days 2 and 3, helmets and jointly approved protective shirts are permitted for the full speed of practice.
What's that mean?
They have these protective shirts now that a lot of them are capturing data, and like this wearable that I have from Whoop that captures all your data. So approved practice shirts. On days 4 and 5, helmets and jointly approved practice shirts, shells, and spiders are permitted for the full speed practice. I don't know what a spider is. Do you? In this context?
No.
Thank God there's no snakes.
Read on.
All players shall receive a mandatory day off on the day following the completion of the on-field acclimation period. Following the 5-day on-field acclimation period, 2-a-day practice shall be permitted subject to the following rules. Players may be on the field for a total of no more than 4 hours per day. They may participate in no more than 1 padded practice per day, no longer than 2.5 hours of on-field activities. And they call this thing, it's called Pro Bowl practice pace. Have you ever heard that term?
No, I have not. This is
okay.
Everything you're telling me, Todd, is novel.
This is called, and it's throughout practice, training camp, OT, and it's called Pro Bowl practice pace. So apparently in the Pro Bowl, you just walk and you're almost in slow motion.
Well, it's the end of the season,
and they don't want anybody. And so they actually have a film that is called Pro Football Practice Pace that everybody watches, and that's the pace. It's like almost slow motion.
It's probably more for the coaches.
It's a glorified walkthrough, and that's the pace.
I practiced at the Pro Bowl practice pace.
They called that was the Riggo practice pace.
They could rename it actually. They could rename it.
So it eliminates the amount of hitting in any of that is there. They outlaw prohibited drills. The following drills are prohibited during preseason, regular season, postseason padded practices.
Okay, this is almost like when they go through the rules committee and change, like there's going to be more emphasis on the contact this year, right?
Oh, we're going to start with the big stuff first, though.
Okay, yeah, but I'm just
this
saying.
Some of the stuff's going to ring your bell.
Yeah.
Bull in the ring, king of the circle.
Can't not do that anymore.
Outlawed. Don't even think about it.
I haven't done that since college.
The following, and I love, prior to the start of the drill, players stand in a circle surrounding one player in the middle. Each player is assigned a number. The drill begins when a coach calls out a number. The player to whom that number was assigned is then required to charge at the player standing in the middle of the circle. So, no, there'll be no more bull in the ring.
I've never understood bull in the ring, though. Are you supposed to tackle a guy in the center?
No, you're supposed to block. So you're reacting from different positions, right? But I don't know. You're the
that
Hall of Fame
reminds me.
football
They might have
player.
gotten that from an old film I saw that was based on some kind of like Clark Gable or somebody in Africa. You know, and it might have been Magombo. I can't remember, but this is where it was the same type of deal, except they had darts, and they'd yell, and you had a little shield, and you'd have to turn and catch the dart with the shield.
That'd have a better chance of being allowed today.
I think that was
versus.
That's where they got this from.
All
I mean,
right.
this is ancient.
This is Oklahoma drill.
Oh, is that where
Players begin the drill barricaded on each side and lined up directly across from each other. Players could be a defensive tackle, offensive lineman, ball carrying a linebacker. Upon the start of the drill, players attack each other straight on with no angles. Banned. Don't even think about it.
And isn't there a runner behind it too? Isn't that,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
the
that's
Oklahoma.
Right. Yeah.
Isn't that one of the first things that Martango brought to Carlisle? Schottenheimer? Didn't he? I think he said, we're bringing back the Oklahoma drill. He wants to find out. I got to say, Coach, I don't want it that bad. I'm sorry. You got to find somebody else.
Here's one. This is called O-line, D-line, in-line run blocking / board drill. Two players begin a drill by aligning directly across or slightly offset from one another within an artificially confined area. Okay. The intent of this rule is to prohibit one-on-one test of strength within artificially confined areas that do not permit the defensive player to angle his approach and shed the blocker or take evasive action. Bam!
So it's just basically mano a mano.
Yeah.
As Doc Walker would say, manhood issue.
It's a manhood issue.
Yeah, it's a manhood issue.
You're also not allowed to have half-line, pods, three-spot, offensive and defensive players line up in partial formation but practice run blocking. Prohibited. It's intended to prohibit thud, THUD live, inline contact. There are no angles for an offensive player to block or for a defender to rush.
I got to stop you right here.
It's mind-blowing.
What can you do? What can you do? In other words, there's no contact. Well, I don't know.
That's what
Can they do 11 on 11 where you actually are scrimmaging?
No.
Can you scrimmage?
No.
You can't even.
Actually, I'll take that back. Here's what you can do. Now, it's more limited, actually. Now I'm going to go to regular season and postseason practice. I'm going to come back to that in a second. During the regular season, padded practice for all players shall be limited to a total of 14. That's the entire season, John. 11.
So that's basically, that's not even quite one a week.
11 of which must be held during the first 11 weeks of the regular season.
So you get in one for 11, and then you can use.
Now you
them as
could
one.
double up early if you did, but you got to use 11 by the 11th. 3 which must be held during the remaining 6 weeks of the regular season. So if you doubled up early on, club may hold 2 padded practice during the same week during 1 week of the regular season, but then it has to fall within the first 11 weeks.
But padded doesn't necessarily mean contact.
Exactly.
Right?
And again, I kept looking, and here's what I keep saying. Pro Bowl practice pace, as demonstrated in a video jointly approved by the parties. I mean, it goes on and on. So even what you're seeing out at camp right now, they're glorified walkthroughs, and their players are getting more coaching from hitting bags and positioning.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? I mean, compared to the old days, because I think most people would agree that our football oriented that grew up with football, that either coached football, played football, guys my age that watch the game today, I find it stunning how much that the fundamentals have just completely eroded. I don't know if you can name me one defensive back, and there are some out there, but the rank and file, it's not a matter of ever actually. I mean, Pat Fisher comes to mind, an old timer that exactly knew it understood what leverage was. And he had a way of getting underneath ball carriers and surviving and tackling you, wrapping you up and dropping you on the spot. Not grabbing hold of your shoulder pads and hanging on, going, hey, somebody help me. I mean, that's basically what you see today. And I think a lot of this is attributable to that. Now, is the game more exciting? Possibly. It very well may be. You certainly see a lot more scores. You see a lot of passing. I mean, and that's what the game has evolved into, and I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying, though, what you really want to look at, if you want to look at skilled football players, I would have to say that actually the fundamentals of the game, blocking, everything's all up here,
Right.
and it's like basketball. It's not, I want to see some drive blocking. You don't hardly ever see it. I'll tell you, a guy who was a great athlete, tremendous athlete, played here, Trent Williams. He was such a good athlete, he didn't really have to drive block because he could jump up and wall off a guy, and
Right.
screen. They were setting screens.
You
It
always
wasn't
said that.
blocking.
You always said that. Yeah, that
I
he was
just-
big enough, quick enough, athletic enough
Yes.
that you can't get past me, but it's really not the banging.
He ain't going to drive you off the ball. And when you think about it, back in those days, here he was, this specimen, and this had freakish talent. But if you ever wanted to line up and get in behind him and say, "We need a yard, okay, let's go," wasn't the guy you wanted to run behind,
Right.
Because he didn't know how to drive block.
Right.
I mean, it just, to me, it's the same thing across the board for the most part. Now, the receivers are extremely skilled. In other words, the skilled positions, they're excellent. They run great routes. They got great hands and all this stuff. That hasn't really, the quarterbacks, I think, that has all been out because that's what the emphasis is on.
Sure.
Now. And it's really all about, let's see if people want to see the ball thrown. They want to see the ball caught. They want to see touchdown scored. They also want to see a pick six here. In other words, it's all about the big play.
Yeah.
And the what do they call it, ground and pound or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's
It'll be
it's going the way of the
fascinating to
dinosaur.
see if it's kind of like everything old is new again because the league is a copycat league, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you saw what the Rams did last year, and you see more teams that have a balanced attack this season. And will we ever see an old ground and pound team where somebody says, you know what, this is who we are? Because knowing that the opposition is not built for this, they don't really want to hit us and do like the old days of what you guys used to do.
Well, Tennessee may be an exception.
Right.
Right? Because they got that big kid down there. I can't think of his
Henry?
name. Huh?
Henry?
Yeah, exactly. They seem to, when he's on, and this is what you see, really. You see, he is probably big enough and intimidating enough, and with the lack of fundamentals in the secondaries of
They don't want nothing to do with him.
well, you know what? It's like grab a hold of him and slow him down enough that the rest of the what do you call it? The angle, the people taking the angles can get there and help you out.
Well, John, it's similar, and we've showed the stiff arms that Henry is alleged for, that you were for, because when the guys in the back don't have the technique and don't want to get down when they see you coming.
Right. You're legal prey for him. It's not, usually I was used to thinking of it, I was the prey. There's 11 of them over there. There's one of me. Nowadays, it's one of him, 11 of them, and they're the prey. Supposedly, I don't know. They always just said that, what was it, Jim Taylor played for the Green Bay Packers.
Right.
So Jim Taylor, he was known to go look guys up. In other words, he'd go, right here. I'm going, Jim, you're nuts. This isn't the way we play the game. You try to avoid contact. You don't go looking for people, but maybe Derrick Henry does go looking for folks. I don't know.
Well, we'll see. It's hard to believe football's here.
It is here.
It is here.
And we ain't, because we got to go. I got some more yard to work on. That's Riggo out. Thank you for watching.